Okay, I'm drinking lemon balm and basil tea from my herb garden out front. I have fresh lemon balm and fresh basil, among other things. And I like to clip the lemon balm leaves and the basil leaves and mash them up and make a tea out of them with a slice of lemon and a little bit of honey. It is delightful and calming and bright, and I absolutely love it. Okay, today's update is going to be quick because I have been monogamous with one project. And apparently that wasn't enough to stop me from knitting an entire leg in the opposite direction. Hi, my name is Taylor, and today I want to share with you my frog and toad project that I am knitting for my son Ronan for Christmas, and this is from frogandcast.com. I know so many of you have probably been wondering, where is that frog and toad project that she said she was going to knit? Maybe you were quietly taking bets on whether I'd actually start it, or whether this was going to be one of those things that quietly slips into the void, never to be spoken about again. Maybe that was just my own self-doubt whispering in my ear. I don't know. Either way, I finally sat down and got started, and honestly, it's the only thing I've been working on since my last project update. My terrazzo sweater is resting quietly on the back burner, and Frog has completely taken over because he and Toad are going to be a Christmas gift, like I said, for Ronan. Right now, Frog has two legs that are technically finished, and the air quotes are important here. His body is done. His first arm is on waist yarn now. I just put it on waist yarn just a moment ago. There's his first arm right there. And he is absolutely adorable thus far. So here, let's just get a little dose of my frog skin here. Yeah, so here he is. And I've admired him from a polite distance. Everything, was going fine. Everything was great. But it didn't go fine. It isn't completely great. I looked a little closer than I usually do, and I realized I knit one of his legs backwards. See, you can see it. You can see one of his adorable little frog legs is flipped the other way. So we have the back of this one and the front of this one. And, flip him around, he's flipped backwards. Aren't those the cutest little frog legs? When I was making these, I was just absolutely in awe of how adorable these little frog legs are, and how this amorphous blob turns into a frog right before your very eyes just as you're working on it. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a point in the pattern when you go to knit the second leg that instead of having the front of the frog facing you when you begin the leg, you have to turn it around and have the back of the frog facing you. I did not do that. Frog is basically just a little green bean with vibes. I kind of got tricked by the light. The front looked like the back looked like the front, and I just kept going. I merrily knit leg number 2 as leg number 1 part 2, and now Frog has 2 left feet. Probably not a great dancer. This is why we slow down. This is why we check our fronts and backs. And this is why frogs should come with labels saying front. And I guess technically in this frog's defense, it does. It has this little chin situation that pokes out here, but sometimes it can get pushed to the back and you don't notice it as much. Okay, fortunately, it's a small fix, something that I can absolutely handle, which is why the arm is now on waist yarn, because I'm going to need those needles to fix my leg situation. Now, there are some things I've learned in the process of doing this, some revelations that I've made. I've gotten a lot of joy out of this project. It's a very small project. It hasn't taken me very long, but I've been working on it little by little every day, not spending a great deal of time on it every day, but little by little I work a section. And some of the things I've realized. The first is that a frog is an amorphous blob until it isn't, and you realize that you actually have a frog and not just a strange puddle of yarn knit into a really fine gauge fabric. Orientation matters. Lighting matters. My lord, with this dark green yarn, lighting is so important. I actually ordered myself a neck light because my other neck light went kaput. I don't really know what's going on with it, but I found this one on Amazon that looks ideal because it has a light bar as opposed to 2 points of light, and I feel like it'll be better for giving me a broad kind of beam of light, if you will. So I'm excited to get that because I think it's going to make knitting the little details a lot easier in a darker yarn. I've also realized something interesting. I genuinely enjoy knitting the tiny circumferences here only. And I mean this, I emphasize only in the context of knitting a small little woodland creature or swamp creature, amphibious creature, if you will. I have no interest, after working with this and working these little small circumferences, I have no interest in knitting gloves with fingers. This has taught me that I don't want to knit small circumferences in that volume. And I only really enjoy it when I know it's in creation or it's in an effort to create the most adorable little frog legs. If I knew I had to knit 10 little sections over and over and over again, or 10 fingers, one after the other for 10 fingers, this does not appeal to me. I don't want to do that. Tiny limbs on frogs, yes. Tiny fingers on gloves, absolutely not. That is the boundary that stays put, in my opinion. As for the yarn choice here, this is actually Fiber for the People, born, shorn, and dyed 100% merino rambouillet. It's a yarn that I carry most often. There is a small batch of this yarn going into the shop today, but it's a very small leftover batch until February when I start carrying this again after shearing season and all of that. Anyway, this is a fantastic yarn for the texture because it is a very nubby and slubby yarn. There's lots of texture in there. It's a semi-woolen spun yarn. It's a 2-ply. It's perfect for this. So you can see Frog's little body has lots of little nubs and warts and fun little texture like that. And I think it makes for such a perfect little storybook creature and storybook texture. It's almost like he's walking out of an illustration, and I absolutely love it. The needles though. Now I'm using these DPNs here because I didn't have a size 1 DPN in my collection, which is absolutely bonkers to me. I know that I used to, I'm not really sure what's happening, but these longer DPNs are a complete pain in the butt. They are so long, and when you're working with such a small circumference, you've got such long needles poking out everywhere. Not the greatest, and you really do have to kind of maneuver around the needles as you go. Your hands are involved, the yarn, and all of this. Next time I do this, I would opt for the much shorter DPNs. I think they sell ones that are almost like half this length. You don't really need anything more than that, so this is a little bit longer than I would have liked. I also would have preferred wood, but they didn't have it. I needed to run out and get them last minute, and this was all I had. So this is just some basic cheap metal DPNs I picked up at Michael's, and they do the job, but I would prefer them to be shorter. I would prefer them to be wood or bamboo. As for the pattern itself, let me just tell you, it's wonderful. The only reason I made a mistake was because I was just in the bad lighting. I was kind of tricked into thinking I was looking at the front and I was looking at the back, and it was my own problem. It was my own fault, I guess I should say, but the pattern is beautifully written, and the photos in the pattern that I see here, they're really great photos of each section laid out, so you know kind of what the trajectory is in terms of what this is supposed to look like. So I think the pattern is actually really great, and I'm kind of amazed that the pattern led me to create what looks to me like an actual frog. It's remarkable. It really is. It's an art form for somebody to be able to design something like this that looks just like what it's supposed to look like. It's really fantastic. Now I do plan on stuffing this, obviously, because I can't give a deflated frog to Ronan for Christmas, and I'm using a type of stuffing that is requested in the pattern. They're little pellets, but there's some kind of like eco-friendly, made from recycled plastic pellet that you put in here, and it's great because it's a synthetic material. You don't have to worry about mold or any kind of weird stuff like that, and I don't want to have to worry about that. And I can get it wet if I need to soak this to wash it for any reason. So that's what I'm going to be using for Frog here. I'm planning to add the stuffing or the pellets right through the top of Frog's head here. You can kind of see the opening of his head. It feels mildly barbaric, but apparently it's the easiest and most practical way to fill him evenly. So that's my plan. I've never done weighted stuffing before. In fact, I've only ever really done stuffing on a few occasions. So this is going to be a learning experience for the both of us here. That's what we do this for, right? Okay, so this is the point where I want to use Frog here as a jumping off point to get a little philosophical, because I feel like I've learned a few things, not just about knitting, small things like Frog, but just a few things in general when working on this project, and I want to share those with you. Knitting something this tiny, little stitches, little needles, little limbs that look like little green beans, forces your brain into a different gear. You can't rush it. You can't muscle your way through it. You have to let the work set the pace. And I've been doing a pretty good job of reminding myself of that. And I think that's why I'm really kind of embracing this project. It is something that teaches you to slow down. Pay attention, zoom in with your eyes, with your mind, and realize something like this requires your focus. And that really is a quiet lesson that Frog has been teaching me throughout this process. Projects like sweaters and blankets, they kind of stretch out. They make you feel productive in less time because you can see the stitches accumulate. But then there are projects like Frog, the small, fiddly, ridiculous ones that grow millimeter by millimeter and somehow carry the most meaning. When you're knitting a creature, You aren't just making fabric. You're making something with a little face, something that will be held, something that will have a place in someone's childhood. And that responsibility feels different. In stitching together this tiny body with legs that insist on pointing the opposite direction, I'm reminded creativity isn't always about momentum. Sometimes it's tiny, slow, and deeply personal. Sometimes I think the most grounding projects are possibly the ones that force you to get small. Frog is teaching me patience, attention, and the difference between focus and perfection. And he's reminding me that handmade things are supposed to feel like someone made them. So this is where Frog stands today. One well-behaved leg, one renegade leg, one arm on waist yarn, and a lot of personality packed into a slubby green body. I'll update you guys once I fixed the leg and started stuffing him with little beans like a tiny gym bag. But in the meantime, let me know if you've knit Frog and Toad or anything like this, and if you've experienced something similar to that feeling of bringing things down to a smaller size and how it really causes you to focus, and how it's important to remember focus isn't perfection, it's commitment. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this commitment. Let me know your experience on this. I'm just kind of riffing at this point because I feel like Frog has kind of given me a little bit of a, I know it's teaching me some lessons here, and I love that. It's making me think, and I always love that. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today for today's update video. You may have noticed that the sun has been going in and out. It's going to get rainy here in just a little bit. And I'm looking forward to that because we can use all the rain we can get. Until we meet again for Thursday's episode, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.